All right, welcome. My name is Matt Ramsey. I'm the Communication Director of Alumni Engagement for Pi Kappa Phi. Thanks for tuning in to Living the Third Decision. I'm here with Adam Morris from the Alpha Omega chapter at the University of Oregon. He is the CEO of Sales First Recruiting and an experienced networker who's excited to share some tips on how you can optimize your network. Hey, Adam.
Hey, thanks for having me, Matt.
Of course. Let's start by just talking about your background. Tell me a little bit about your experience joining Pi Kappa Phi.
So I was a freshman at U of O, and I went through Rush my freshman year, but I left thinking that maybe it wasn't for me. I went to all these cool events, made friends, had fun, but I was like, I don't know. Like, I didn't know if I really felt like I had met a group of people that I wanted to, call home for the next 4 years. And so stayed in the dorms, and I ended up getting this job at the annual giving program, which is like a telemarketing program that the U of O hosts. And I worked with these two guys, the Pats, Pat and Patrick. We had a blast working together, and they invited me to come hang out with them at Pi Kappa Phi. And after that, the rest is history. Like, I just clicked with all the guys, and I ended up joining my spring term.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so in your undergraduate experience, like what sticks out to you? Is there any leadership experiences or fond memories?
Yeah, so I would say my biggest takeaway from Pi Kappa Phi was, I would say, the rapid maturation that I had in the fraternity. So I was telling you in an earlier conversation, Matt, that I was a young freshman when I was 17, and I had a lot of growing up to, because when I got to campus as a 17-year-old, I went nuts. And it was my first time having like no rules and all this freedom. And I was basically flunking out of school and partying way too much. And my parents were super concerned that if I joined a fraternity, it was going to get worse. But in reality, those guys taught me how to balance things. Like, I had never really seen those sorts of study habits. Like in the dorms, I didn't really get, firsthand experience seeing how hard people had to study. And so those guys actually helped me get my grades up, and they got me into leadership. And so even though maybe like studying weren't my fondest memories, I would say Pi Cap's got me on the right track in life. I easily could have flunked out of school if it weren't for them.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And so, as you kind of transitioned from undergrad and started your career, what did that look like, and how did you get to where you are now?
So I was a public relations major, which is part of the journalism school at U of O. And I was always really good with language skills, reading, writing, speaking, but I wanted to be in sales. I just felt like I'd be good at it, and I felt like there was a quicker path to money.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a few different sales jobs out of school. Some of them were like, a year here, 2 years there. But I eventually landed at T-Mobile doing business sales for them, where I spent like 7 or 8 years. And what was really interesting about that experience is I just had all these different mentors there that I accumulated. Directors and VPs, and I was on the number one team in the nation, where every single person there was contending for top rep in the nation. And so they really taught me to like raise my game and just compete super hard. And that was a huge experience for me in like really getting my career off the ground, is just being surrounded by winners at all times.
Yeah.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, for sure. And so how did you go from like T-Mobile to now running Sales First Recruiting?
Yeah, so I had a recruiter who placed me at T-Mobile, and we clicked. He ended up being a really close friend of mine, and he was always asking me if I wanted to franchise his business in Portland. He owned a company up in Seattle called West Coast Careers.
Okay.
And it was never the right time for me. I was always very happy at T-Mobile, very cozy. I was making good money and had great friends there. And one day let me preface it by saying that I had one kid and two on the way.
Okay.
And so my wife was pregnant with twins, and I was kind of nervous. I stopped really trusting T-Mobile because I had been seeing so many layoffs and reorgs. It seemed like every 6 months there was a major shift in the company. And I was worried that one day my name would be highlighted in pink by some early grads from Harvard who didn't know me. And eventually that happened at T-Mobile. All sorts of my colleagues were let go after I left, like a couple years later. But I just realized that I trusted myself and my abilities more than I trusted the company. And so one day I said yes to him. And so I moved up to Seattle and lived with him for about 3 months. And he taught me how to run an agency. And I already knew how to recruit salespeople because I've been doing that my whole career. And so I franchised this company in Portland. It was West Coast Careers, Oregon. And after a few years, we had outgrown West Coast Careers and the relationship and the value they provided for us. So basically, I wrote him a check, and we rebranded and opened up new markets, and we've been sales first recruiting ever since.
That's great. And so, it's kind of evident that networking and finding mentors has played a really big role in your success and your career trajectory. And we've talked before about your networking philosophy. Would you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I'd say my networking philosophy is twofold. On one hand, it's about being yourself and being authentic and curious, and that's with just other people, building relationships in general. But then at actual networking events and joining communities, it's about putting in the work to be a part of the community and advancing the cause of whatever community you join.
Yeah, absolutely. And so if I was looking to kind of implement this approach in my life, what are some of the first steps that I should take?
So I'll start with like collecting partners and mentors. Like I'm a person who if I have any sort of a struggle in any sort of an area, there's all sorts of people that I'll reach out to and ask for help. And then I'm also on the other end of that phone call with other folks, right? But I would say, like, anytime I need help, I'm really, really honest about the help that I need. And you have to be really vulnerable too. Like, you have to be able to let them know that you're not perfect, that you have flaws, that you have mental hurdles, and you have to be able to talk about things happening in your life that could be a block for you, right? And so, for example, let's say that you're a young manager and you're having problems with an employee. You have to be able to call somebody up and say, hey, here's the deal. I'm having trouble with this employee, and I'm afraid that if I do the things that I know I need to do, it's going to backfire, right? So you have to be able to share what you're afraid of. And that takes courage to admit when you're scared. Mm-hmm. And that is a huge philosophy of mine is having the courage to be vulnerable. It's tougher than people think. But then when it comes time to join a community, like for me, I spent a lot of my time in Entrepreneurs Organization, mm-hmm. which is we have like 19,000 members globally, but in Portland we have like almost 200.
Okay.
And we all spend all of our time together, learning events, social events. But if you really want to get a lot out of it and really network like a pro, you have to join committees or join the board. You have to be a leader in the organization in some way. Because if you're not advancing the cause of it, you're just another dude kind of shaking hands and laughing, which is fine, but you really get to know people when you're working side by side with them.
So when you talk about advancing the cause, early into a career, it might be hard to wind up as a chair on a board or even lead a committee. What are some of the first things that someone can do once they join an organization to advance the cause?
Yeah, so I'll talk about Oregon just because that's what I know, but there's a bunch of really great, like, industry associations in town. Like if you're a software developer, for example, you could join TAO, Technology Association of Oregon, right? And there's all sorts of like micro communities in that association. And you can, call one of the staff members and say like, hey, here's what I'm good at, here's what I like doing, how can I get involved? And they'll say something like, well, hey, we're going to have a mixer, come and meet some people. Or they'll say something like, oh, we're going to have a call about how AI is affecting our jobs for better or worse, right? And you start meeting people there and you're having conversations about these topics, and you can just start asking like, who put on this committee, or who put on this event? Like, how do I get involved in that? So whatever it is you care about, you can find out how to get involved, and then you can become sort of a regular presence there, and eventually you'll be asked to join, the board or the committee or whatever.
Yeah, so I know we've talked a little bit of a couple different options local to you, but what are the signs that really indicate that an organization or a community is going to be good for networking?
Well, to a certain extent, it's trial and error. I just hired a woman in our Arizona office, and she's a salesperson for us. And I had her list out like 50 different associations or events, and she started going to some of them, and after going to them, she started to learn from folks she talked to, like, what were the big pillars of the community, right? And I don't remember the names, but she identified like 3 that were the big ones that everybody was a part of. So, but also, you might find like maybe you're, let's say you're a recent grad and you get a job at Paychex, right? They spend a lot of time calling on like, CPAs, and you can get involved in a CPA association, right? Just try out a couple and see which ones work for you.
Cool. So really, I mean, just balancing trial and error to see where you can show up as your most authentic self and get aligned with the cause that they're working towards.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then when you're there, right, you say like, hey, I'm a young professional, and I'm trying to make the most of my career here. Like, do you have any tips for me? And it goes a long way, because professionals love to give advice, and asking for it is a great opener.
And now, like, once you've attended a couple of these events, met different people, I know we've talked about the significance of meaningful follow-up. What are your tips? What strategies do you like to use to follow up with people so that you can kind of continue to build those relationships?
So normally I would follow up with somebody when I just liked them, right? So if we had a cool conversation and I thought that they were also a fun person, I would hit them up and say like, hey man, it was fun meeting you the other night. Can I pick your brain on X topic? And I can come to a coffee shop near you, right? That's an easy one. Another one is to, maybe you have some business you could refer to them. That's a good one, but that doesn't always happen. But I'm just a big fan of sending a message, connecting with them on LinkedIn, and inviting them to a next step. And then also, I wouldn't take it personally if they're not interested or if they don't respond. People meet a lot of people at these events, and once you start to have a presence there, you'll get to know all these people and see them more often anyway.
Cool.
Yeah.
So as we kind of think about networking, talked about your experience, your philosophy, what's the best piece of networking advice that you've received?
You get out what you put in. It's so simple, but it's so true. Because if you just show up to an event and you're handing out cards and just trying to be social, all it's going to be is you handing out cards and trying to be social. But But if you show up repeatedly and make an effort to meet a few folks that you think could benefit you in your career, or if you show up regularly and ask to get involved, you will eventually benefit from it, and quite a lot, right? I personally don't do very much sales for my company at all anymore, but I'm very active in the community. And so I would say multiple times per week, there's a message for me in my inbox that says, hey, so-and-so told me to reach out to you because we need to hire 3 or 4 sales reps. And these are people that I've known for a very long time. I may have not even done business with them, but we've just had 100 sidebar conversations while advancing the cause of EO, or maybe I've coached alongside them, for like football or something like that. It's just getting involved.
Yeah. So what advice would you give if you could only give one piece of advice to young professionals on how to optimize their network? What would it be?
I would say be yourself, but that can come across as cliche. But I would say that if you're a shy person, be cool being shy. If you're a pushy person, be cool being pushy, right? Just like accept who you are and make connections and show up regularly.
Yeah. So when we're looking at how to just improve networks, are there any resources that you recommend for learning more?
I think there's a lot of content, like people who have written blogs about networking. I personally am not a fan of online networking at all. I think it's too manufactured.
Okay.
But if you can go somewhere in person, that's a big step in the right direction. I also, probably the best book I've ever read is How to Win Friends and Influence People. And I think that's a really strong book to help with networking, even though it wasn't written to do that. There is a book, I haven't read it, but I've heard about it. It's called Never Eat Alone. And that's essentially a book about networking and how you can just turn anything into networking, right? Make a phone call when you're having lunch and say, hey, I'm grabbing a lunch at noon. Come meet me if you want. I want to talk to you about this topic you brought up. I would say that's what I would say.
Cool. Anything else you'd like to share before we wrap up?
Yeah, I would say that for not just for Pi Caps, but anyone who's ever joined a fraternity or a sorority, they should know the power of getting involved and sticking around, because all these Pi Caps, they dedicated, we'll call it 3 to 4 years in this fraternity. And it really is true that these guys will be your brothers for life. I am constantly hanging out with my Pi Cap brothers. And this was, I graduated in 2002, right? So it's been 22 years now since I've graduated, and I'm still hanging out with these guys, golfing with them, birthdays, all that. So if you believe that works, then you should believe that showing up regularly and getting involved in your community will work too.
Well, Adam, thank you so much. I really appreciate all the insight and experience that you've shared. I know that it'll have a really positive benefit on all of our members and guys who are just starting off in their career, trying to learn how to make the most of their fraternity experience as they transition into a new chapter. So again, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.